party, we like to party, party, party all night long. Party, party, we like to party, 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 never go home. Party, party, we like to party, party, party all night long. Party, party, we like to party, 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 never go home.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 4 of the Ball Talk podcast. Today, we're going to introduce a new segment, which we'll get to in a second with Chris. Talk about the last week of the Oklahoma City Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's chances at the MVP, along with some discussion on the rotation players. And then lastly, we will unfortunately be recapping the Oklahoma football bowl game against Navy and what has transpired since then. Chris, you're with me tonight as always. How's it going, man?
What's up, Ben? I just had some Brahms ice cream, not an ad. It was delicious. Had some of their fresh filtered water. It was delicious. So I'm feeling really good. Feeling really, really good.
Getting all those carbs and ice cream in before the New Year's shred.
Before I have to burn it all off, That's all right. It'll be worth it in the end.
So speaking of being worth it in the end, we'll see if this next segment is. We're going to introduce potentially our first segment, News with Chris. Just take it away, man.
All right, here we go. In a game that meant nothing for the playoff race, but everything for draft order, Drew Lock led the Giants to a win over the 6-9 Colts. Lock's 5 touchdowns dropped the Giants from the first pick all the way back to the 4th pick. Next Sunday, in the last game of the NFL regular season, the Vikings and the Lions will face off to decide the number 1 seed in the NFC. Who will go on the road and who will go on the road and play in the wild card game, and who will have a home game? A miraculous overtime victory for the Commanders, and they are now playoff bound for the first time since 2020. Now moving on to college football, it's down to 8 teams, with Penn State playing Boise State. PSU is favored by 11, so that might be a blowout. The remaining games are all being played on the 1st. Notre Dame, Georgia. Georgia's favored by 1. Ohio State, Oregon. Oregon is favored by 2.5, I believe. Texas and Arizona State, another big spread. SGA and Tyrese Maxey are Western Conference and Eastern Conference Players of the Week. In that stretch, SGA is 35, 6-6, while Maxey is 32, 4-8. Multiple fights break out in the NBA this week, each with a bunch of players thrown out and a bunch of punches thrown. The Rockets and Heat last night, and the Suns Mavericks earlier in the week. The Kings fired head coach Mike Brown as he was on the way to the airport to their next game. Lakers trade D'Angelo Russell and others to the Nets for Dorian Finney-Smith and Shake Milton. I believe this is Shake Milton's 3rd team of the year. In college basketball, there are 4 remaining unbeaten men's teams: Tennessee, Drake, Florida, and your hometown Sooners. Be on the lookout for more college basketball after the break as the Sooners hope to continue the success in SEC play. That is the news with Chris.
Wow, what a rush. What a rush. Well done, Chris. Well done.
Thank you.
Before we get into the Thunder, I think my favorite thing is that the Commanders beat the Falcons last night in overtime, because it now sets up a win and make the playoffs for Baker Mayfield's Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right. That's right.
So
he
had 5 touchdowns yesterday, threw for over 300 yards. I think it was like 359. I unfortunately was playing him in my fantasy football championship game. I can't be too upset about it. We were in Dallas for the Cowboys game last week, and watching him play football is the only joy I find in watching football these days.
Yeah. Did you see that Robert Griffin III tweeted something about the mistake the Browns have made trying to have an adult in the quarterback room by hiring whoever they did?
I think I saw that Deshaun Watson threw for 5 total touchdowns this year, and Baker threw for 5 yesterday.
Yes. So the Browns made a terrible decision, but
nothing's new.
We all knew that when they let go of Baker. Baker's the best thing to happen to the Sooners in a long time, and he was the best thing to happen to the Browns in that same time. So
for sure. But they got to win this week to make it, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, moving on into the Oklahoma City Thunder. Since we last talked, the Thunder went 3-0 with wins over 3 Eastern Conference teams. They beat the Wizards at home, the Pacers on the road, and then the Hornets on the road as well. Excuse me, it was actually 4 games since we last talked because they played last night as well,
Right.
and beat the Memphis Grizzlies. But
A
I
depleted
think,
Memphis Grizzlies.
yeah, it wasn't really the real Memphis Grizzlies. John Morant got hurt the day or two before. He actually was announced today to be week to week right now with an AC joint sprain.
Yeah,
So
last night on the bench he had a sling on.
yeah, it's not good. He like ran into a pick or a screen, and he immediately grabbed for it and like it was like limp. So
Right. But
it's a
that's
shooting
to
it's a
say
shooting arm.
the Thunder did what they had to do against a depleted team. They totally dominated every facet of the game. Like, you have to do that against a team like that.
Yeah, but I think that's what is so unique, and one of the things that us Thunder fans need to not take for granted is that so many of these teams play up and down to their competition. And Shea has been asked before, does he get motivated for these games where, I mean, LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller missed the Hornets game last week. And he just is like, every time we go out there, Mark always talks about the 0-0 mentality. And he just wants to play the best basketball he can play, regardless of who's lining up against him.
Right.
And I think another cool thing is he has the perspective of he's in the NBA, and he's mentioned, he's like, there are 450 roster spots in the NBA, and it's 450 of the best players in the world. So even though you're not getting your star players, I mean, you see it across the league. I mean, the Nuggets lost to the Wizards, who are arguably the worst team in the NBA. If you don't show up on any given night, you can lose in the NBA regardless of who's on the other side.
100%. Yeah, I mean, the NBA is full of NBA players who, I mean, remember the White Mamba, what's his name?
Jason Williams?
No, he's the guy who was
Brian Scalabrine?
Brian Scalabrine. He was called out on Twitter about, people thinking they could beat him, and he said, yeah, bring every challenger you can, and he beat them 11-0 every time. And he said afterwards, he said, I'm closer to LeBron than you are to me. And there's just
NBA, and he was one of the worst NBA players.
Right.
He'll tell you that.
The NBA is not for everybody. To make it in the NBA is such an accomplishment that you're right. Any given night, you could be beaten by a guy who scored 40 in high school,
Yep.
every night.
Well, I just am glad I don't have to go up against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now. As we were talking before we hopped on here, Chris, Shai is now the betting favorite for the MVP award this year, surpassing Nikola Jokic. Now, Jokic is putting up some incredible stats, but the issue is Denver is currently 7th in the West at the time we're currently recording this. They're currently playing
that time
of game right now. But they're the 7th seed. They're 17-13. So the NBA moves the goalposts every year, it feels like, in terms of what they look for in an MVP. I mean, last year you saw Shai was the number 1 seed. I mean, they tied with the Nuggets, the Thunder, and the Nuggets tied for the 1 seed, but they gave it to Jokic. Several people think Shai should have won it. He finished 2nd. But this year, the gap between the Thunder and the Nuggets, if it does come down to those two, I think it's far too insurmountable for Jokic. I mean, he'd have to carry this team out of the play-in, averaging 40, 15, and 15, I think.
Yeah, but votes are cast before the play-in, right?
Yeah. They're cast by the end of the regular season and then announced during the beginning of the second round of the playoffs.
I agree. I think he would have to do. He's probably the best player in the NBA. Like, if you get down to it, passing and shooting and controlling the game. But I on the other hand, there is some like voter fatigue. 2 in a row is a lot in a row for the NBA. You want to see someone else win it.
I think it would be his 4th total too.
It would be his 4th
overall.
total, yeah. Because did Joel win one in between?
Yeah, Yes, he did.
And I think there's going to be voter fatigue, especially if your team is not first in the West. Maybe if he was first in the West and was having all these stats, triple double every night, scoring 50 points, rebounding 20, rebounds are at 20, assists are at 20, incredible numbers, and you're in first, I could see it being an easier, three-peat.
Yeah, I agree. I agree
So,
completely. But what Shea has done, I think, I was reading today on Twitter about it, or X, or whatever we call it, and the Bucks game that did not count, the scrimmage for $500,000 each.
I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I forgot about it, except for what I'm about to say about it.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly. Shea did not play well in that game. The funny thing is, I have NBA.com pulled up and StatMuse, and when you look at game log for both the Thunder and Shea, that game is not referenced. It is not. You can't even find it, at least on this website.
Yeah, it didn't for any of the stats.
Exactly. Shea and the team did not play well that game in a manner that people were freaking out a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot of bit. Just because we didn't play well offensively. Shea did not play well. He did not look good. He did not control that game. Giannis did. And so it really, even though it was a game that did not count, it was a game that really did no favors to Shea's MVP case. And ever since then, I mean, the Thunder had a win streak going into that. That game didn't count, and then has won every game since then. He scored 41 against the Wizards on Monday, 45 at Indiana, and he's the reason we won in Indiana. That team was not ready to play. Shea himself even started out abysmal from the field, and then I think I saw something like after the first quarter, he went like 13 of 14 from the field. And so 45, 7, and 8, he had a dagger 3 in that game. And although the Thunder did not play on Christmas Day, this game was the day after Christmas. There really wasn't a great bowl game on. The NFL wasn't on till later. It was on NBA TV. And so it was on the most nationally broadcasted channel that night. And Shea went off.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, you've kind of seen people start to talk a little bit more. You've seen those odds change, which I know it's gambling. Odds are odds, whatever, you don't know.
Vegas is pretty good at their job.
Vegas is very good at their job. I mean, you listed out those spreads for the college football playoff games, and most of those are going to be pretty much right on the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so he followed that up. He only scored 22 points in Charlotte, but that game you could definitely tell the team was just kind of getting through it. I would say they only had 10 healthy players because Lou Dort was out. Caruso's been out with a hip injury. Was it the Wizards game he got hurt? I think it was the Wizards game, wasn't it?
Yeah, he came up lame. Yeah,
hurt the other hip. That he had missed time for one. I think it was the right hip, and now it's the left hip. But Kaysen was out.
5 years old.
I mean, we have hip problems on the Oklahoma City Thunder. But
we're unhip, uncool, and they're just
number one in the West.
Number one in the West.
But the Charlotte game, it was one of those, like, you never felt like they were going to lose. And Shea just kind of, he didn't have to exert a lot of energy. They knew they had the second night of a back-to-back the next night in Oklahoma City. And then last night against Memphis, he had 35, 6, and 7, a steal, and 4 blocks. And
I thought it was 5 blocks.
I think one got changed to either a steal or a deflection. But according to StatMuse, currently, it is 4 blocks. But you were there. I mean, he just dominated that game, and not just offensively.
Defensively was like, I turned to my wife and I was like, that's his 3rd block of the game. I knew he was going to block. It was Spencer, 25 or 24. Cam Spencer. He was dribbling down. They'd gotten a steal, or the Grizzlies had gotten a steal, and he was kind of slowly dribbling down. And he's like, in his head, I could see him think, I'm going to pump fake. Shea's going to jump. I'm going to go the free throw line. Shea didn't. Shea jumped and just swatted him. And then it like completely changed everything about what I was thinking. I was like, Shea's going to get as many blocks as he wants. Like he's so smart about going and reaching for the ball. It was incredible. It was an incredible defensive performance from him last night. I think as a team we had 9 total blocks, and he was half of them.
I mean, there were a couple plays too, not even with blocks, but just defensive intensity that you could see the bench. Like he had one right in front of the Thunder bench, got a deflection. The team loved it. They went crazy. They go crazy for everything, but it just goes to show when you have a player like that, as we said, setting the tone every night, regardless of who's lining up against him on the other side, that I'm going to prove I'm the best player on this court and I'm going to bring this team with me in a very positive way. You know, he's talked before about he wants to get others comfortable for when the playoffs come. And I think that's a huge thing when looking at the field goal percentage, or I guess 3-point field goal percentage for the rest of the team. Mark's talked about it before too, that they're trying to get these guys to take more difficult shots, not bad shots, but just shots you might see more in the playoffs when the defensive intensity is ramped up and you're not just playing pickup for half the game is what it feels like sometimes. But if we keep playing like this, the Thunder are currently on a 68 game win pace as well. They're on pace to win 68 games. And that's without Chet or Hartenstein ever playing together. They've only lost 2 games all year with a player above 6'6" available. And so
J-Dub might fight you on that.
Hey, he is 6'6" though. I gave him 6'6".
That's right. Yeah. They said he was 6'5".
Yeah, exactly. But what he's doing, if he keeps this up, he's the MVP of this league.
It's an eye test thing. J-Dub last night after the game was asked to make a case for Shea for MVP. And his answer was very simple. He said, "Watch the game." Are you watching the games? Because if you're watching the games, Shea is smooth. He controls the pace of the game. He's able to get his teammates open. He's able to rebound. He's able to play defense at an elite level and shoot the ball. And it looks good. You know, it really passes the eye test with the way he moves around the basketball court. And, you know, watching Jokic, who is an incredible player and makes the smart play and can pass the ball and shoot the ball, it just doesn't look the same. It doesn't pass the eye test, in my opinion.
Well, his team doesn't pass the eye test either, so it's not as enjoyable to watch the Nuggets as the Thunder, in my biased opinion.
Which is a big part of the media's take on the whole MVP thing, how pretty the game is. So I think he rightfully is the leader in the clubhouse for MVP. Will he get it? There's still a lot of season to be played. So
yeah, a lot of basketball left. If he's going to win it, obviously it's trending in the right direction. I'm not saying this stretch makes or breaks it, but if the Thunder go through these next 5 or 6 games with, go 3-2, 4-1, they started with Memphis last night at home. There's a 5-game homestand currently. Obviously that game it lost shine as soon as the injury report was released, which they can't do anything about. But starting tomorrow, which for those that don't know, the Oklahoma City Thunder do have a tradition. Every year they do play on New Year's Eve, and that dates back to the first year in Oklahoma City. The team wasn't great. They won under 30 games. Yes, they had KD, but they were kind of worried about attendance and things like that. And then they had a New Year's Eve game, and that the crowd was so into it. They ended up winning the game. I can't remember who it was against, but ever since then, Oklahoma City has never not had a New Year's Eve game, regardless if we play on Christmas or not. So fun little tidbit there. But they have the Timberwolves tomorrow, which the Timberwolves haven't been great per se. They're currently, in that play-in mix right now, which I kind of think they might bump up. But have them tomorrow, New Year's Eve, and then the Clippers on Thursday, and a back-to-back Clippers Thursday, Knicks Friday night, and then the Celtics on Sunday, all at home. But those are against some of the best teams in the NBA, and a lot of eyes are going to be on those games.
You're right. Right. And a lot of rider eyes. I feel like there's a lot more riders on the East Coast than there are, who stay up and watch the West Coast games. So it's important for his MVP hopes to, play well in front of those many riders who may not stay up and watch a 9 o'clock
West Coast basketball.
West Coast basketball game.
Yeah, for sure. It does feel like a lot of the media members tend to be on the East Coast. But I mean, that's just the home stretch. After that Celtics game, you're at Cleveland, then at the Knicks, and then you're at Washington and at Philadelphia, and then you're home against Cleveland. So this is a huge stretch for this team. I'm not saying they're going to run the table, and we still don't have Chet, so this isn't going to paint a full picture by any means. But this is going to be an exciting stretch of basketball, and whether you're in the arena or watching it on FanDuel Sports or whatever, it's going to be really fun basketball in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, 100%. Even that 76ers game, Joel might give us some fits. He's a great table setting big, able to pass the ball, able to, dominate down low. So that'll be a really interesting game too.
Hopefully he plays. You never know. Until the ball tips, you never know if Joel Embiid's going to play.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it earlier too. Shea won Player of the Week. Tyrese Maxey, the 76ers point guard, just won the Eastern Conference Player of the Week. So they're playing good basketball.
They're playing better basketball as of late.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just I think Joel Embiid should be the one player in the NBA who is exempt from the injury report. Meaning that right as they're announcing the starting lineups, if he's going to play, they play like WWE wrestling music
or something.
John Cena, and he runs out to a hyped crowd.
Not even from the bench. He'd come out of the log, out of the
tunnel. And then maybe they could play it up. One time he's in the mascot costume, and then he takes it off.
They try to hide him.
That would be the way to do it.
He'd play into it too. He's a player in the NBA that loves the theatrics. And there was one game last week. Wherever they were playing, the mascot had a 4-wheeler on the court, and he jumped on the 4-wheeler and rode off with the mascot.
Yes,
so he might be into it. He might be into it.
I think that's the way to handle Joel Embiid injury report. It would get eyes on the game for sure. Those NBA ratings would be
through the roof.
Popping.
Only for one game. Just be whoever the 76ers are playing.
Game for the first 5 minutes. But that would be some eyes.
Everybody turns it off at tip off, but I don't know what is determining what ratings are in terms of views.
Is it just number of single eyes on the game? Doesn't matter how long you watch.
Maybe. I don't hate it. We'll have to talk to Mr. Embiid.
Let me tweet him on Blue Sky.
Moving over to Blue Sky.
Maybe Blue Sky should just take the word tweet.
Yeah, because I don't think
this isn't working. Yeah, Blue Sky should just
called on X.
Tweet.
Yeah, well, it was the Blue Sky guy was one of the main developers of Twitter. So bringing a little bit of Twitter home to Blue Sky. We'll see. And that's your social media talk for the podcast.
That's right.
But yeah, Thunder have a big stretch coming up. It's pretty exciting. I'm going to the game tomorrow night. And the Wolves always are a tough matchup. They have Gobert. They traded Cat, so that's not as big. Cat's now with the Knicks, who we'll see on Friday night, which is, I wouldn't say is as big of a matchup as the Celtics, but the Knicks are probably the second best team in the East currently. And so...
you forgot about the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, but I don't know if you've looked at the title odds. They're like 6th. They're the best record in the NBA, and they have the 6th best title odds.
Have they been just playing a bunch of East teams? I honestly haven't watched any.
It's mostly they've played a lot of East teams, but they have beaten.
They beat the Celtics.
The Nuggets. They've split with the Celtics. They've split with the Celtics so far.
Okay. Let me pull up their schedule while you talk.
Yeah, it's Wolves game's going to be interesting. It's the first time we're playing them this year. Again, they haven't been as great with post Cat since they traded Karl Anthony Towns, who was the first overall pick for the franchise, was there for, I think, almost a decade, was the face of the franchise. And then I think you could argue a lot of people didn't like Cat, especially at the beginning of his time in Minnesota, because he just always comes across as a crybaby. But then when you look at what he was able to do when Anthony Edwards came in, and they kind of obviously pushed him to be their top option, and he played his part, and that's why that team made the Western Conference Finals last year. You didn't hear a peep about it, and you could tell he was pretty shaken up whenever he got traded from Minnesota to New York. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion, that the Knicks are far and away the better team out of those two. The Wolves have been bad, chemistry issues. Anthony Edwards is getting fined after post games for using profanity and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Paycom, but hopefully we end 2024 with a Thunder win tomorrow night.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So looking at the Cavs schedule, they played a lot of the bottom of the East, as well as they played like the Lakers from the West. They played New Orleans. They played New Orleans twice. They played Denver twice. They haven't played the best Western Conference teams yet, but that's not to say they're not good. But you're right. I understand
They're very good.
Why their
They're very
title
good.
odds aren't that great.
Like
But
they're
yeah.
behind us, the Celtics, the Knicks. I think even the Mavericks. Before we haven't even touched on this, Luka Doncic is projected to miss at least roughly a month with a calf strain. So we'll see what the Mavs look like. If he's healthy for the playoffs, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of the same thought process we have with Chet on the Thunder side.
Well, it's what they did last year, right? They're 6 seed going to the finals.
5 seed.
Yeah. Okay, 5 seed.
It was like, just get to the playoffs. Don't be in the play-in because you never know what'll happen there.
Right, single game.
Yeah, Thunder play the Mavs on January 17th in Dallas and then January 23rd in Oklahoma City. So I think we'll see the Mavs twice before Luka comes back, which is a bummer. He missed the first game too.
Yeah, we lost to them already without Luka, so it's not like.
But that was one of our games with no center. So.
Right.
I'm still going to want to win those games. I hate the Mavs. Might be my number one team that I don't want to lose to right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll see what happens in this stretch. Going to be pretty big, not only for Shea's title odds, but I wouldn't say creating separation for the Thunder because they already have a 5-game lead in the Western Conference. So let's see. Yeah, it's crazy that the Thunder currently have a 5-game lead on the 2 seed, and then the gap between the 2 seed and the 10th seed is 5 games. So the Thunder are pulling away from there. We'll see what happens coming up. But there's your Thunder talk for the pod, and we're going to move on to OU football. They unfortunately just lost in the First Responders Bowl to the Navy Midshipmen by 1 point. Unfortunately,
the First Responders Bowl, was it? Is that what it's called?
Armed Forces Bowl. Armed Forces
Bowl. Yeah.
OU had a chance to win the game. They
First responders and the military. We respect them both.
We do on this podcast. But they had a chance to win the game. They should have won the game going away. They got up 14-0 really quick. And then in typical OU football fashion, I don't even think they forgot how to play football. They just didn't have any interest in playing it in a winning matter, I guess, in a very uneducated opinion. But Michael Hawkins looked good. He threw for over 300 yards, which was great to see. I don't think he starts next year, as we've discussed. John Mateer will be coming in. Ben Arbuckle did not call plays. He was the quarterback's coach, though, so that was cool to see him on the sidelines.
Cool to see him throw for 300 yards with Ben Arbuckle as his quarterback coach. Kind of says maybe we could
threw
use
for more than any other quarterback
year.
this year. No other quarterback threw even close to 300 yards this year for OU, which obviously had to do with play calling. But we'll see if Joe John Finley, he was the play caller for this game. We'll see if he returns next year. There's a lot of rumblings that him, and I've even seen DeMarco Murray as 2 coaches to watch as this season. Obviously, it's done now, but as the rest of the college football world kind of dies down, DeMarco could even look at an NFL job, I think. They've talked to him before. So there's still changes coming up. One big change the defensive coordinator, Zach Alley, decided to leave the Oklahoma football program after 1 year and become the defensive coordinator under Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia. Tough look. Tough look.
It's a weird look. And then you saw immediately Lewis Carter enter the transfer portal, which seems like maybe we thought there was going to be a flood of guys who left because, they like Zach Alley that much. But then today we had Dominic Williams recommit, essentially, coming back for another year. So maybe Zach Alley wasn't as much of a locker room staple guy as, I personally thought. But
well, the issue is that, this is all rumors, but what seemed to be coming out of Norman is that he told everyone on Saturday night that he was or Friday night or Saturday night, I can't remember which day the news broke, but they told him that he told the team apparently that he was coming back. And it's a pretty big parallel to how one Mr. Lincoln Riley left. And obviously it's different situations.
Lincoln Riley.
Yeah. But I think what's been interesting, and it's almost I'm not a huge believer in OU football at this current point in time, but I think it should be noted at least one positive, I guess, in all this. Alley left. Obviously, Lewis Carter entered the transfer portal, but you have Dominic Williams, who you just mentioned, announced that he was coming back, which he's probably been, before Mateer, the biggest transfer we have gotten in the NIL.
And played well this year.
He was amazing. He was great. He'll come back. He'll be an all SEC favorite next year, first, second, third, whatever.
Anchor that defense.
But whenever he came to OU, it was kind of assumed he would be a one and done. And I don't know. I'm sure maybe he didn't have the year he wanted to have, because if he did, he'd be going to the NFL for sure. But in the current nature of college football, a lot of these guys, especially those like fourth and fifth round guys in the draft, they can make more money coming back to school for one more year than they would on a rookie contract.
Trying to improve their draft stock to make more money in the NFL. Yeah, totally.
But the thing that I think is positive, Lewis Carter's been the only one that's left. Obviously, there's still time. And I say that, I don't think you can enter the transfer portal anymore. I think it shut down on the 28th.
Yeah, I thought the last day was the 28th.
Yeah, and Carter entered on Sunday night.
Isn't there another window?
There's the spring window, but if you enter in the spring window, at least in the SEC, you cannot transfer within the conference.
Gotcha.
You'd have to sit out a year, which I do appreciate that rule. But Lewis Carter did enter. I think that more had to do with the timing of OU's bowl game, because he did enter after the 28th. And I might be getting that date wrong. I'd have to go back and check. But it was at least towards the end of December. But not losing anyone else from that defense, Carter's a big blow. You're losing Danny Stutzman to the draft, Billy Bowman to the draft. But if there's one thing Brent has done, and he was true to his word in this, is that he has changed the culture and the talent on the defensive side of the ball.
Changing the culture for the better or for worse. He's changed it.
Yeah, it's different on both sides than when he started. That's for sure. But I think all of that can be taken as somewhat of a positive. We'll see who the new defensive coordinator is. The things that I've heard, I don't know if you have a preference, but Brandon Hall, he's the current safeties coach for the team. He's been a defensive coordinator before.
Yeah,
Troy.
Hiring from within really worked out last year.
Yeah, I mean, what could go wrong? Everything. Todd Bates is one. I think he's the defensive line coach, but I really think they would go Brandon Hall because he would have experience. And then the other guy that I've heard murmurs of, and I don't know how true it is, but Clemson's current defensive coordinator was at Clemson when Brent was there and worked under him. And there's been murmurs that he might kind of want his own shot, or at least not even his own shot, just like a new change of scenery kind of thing.
That's what I thought Zach Alley was supposed to be. I thought Zach Alley was supposed to be Brent reincarnated and be like Brent's mini-me. So why is he leaving?
From my understanding, and I haven't talked to anyone inside the Switzer Center by any means,
He's
but
lying, he has.
yeah, I have talked directly to Brent. He's coming on the podcast next week. That's a joke. Don't want OU administration coming after this podcast 4 episodes in.
I
But
invite them to.
please do. It'd be great publicity. There's no such thing as bad publicity. Zach Alley felt like as long as he was the defensive coordinator under Brent Venables, it was Venables' defense regardless of what he did. And so I think it was his way. Rich Rodriguez is now the head coach at West Virginia. That is who Zach Alley worked under at Jacksonville State. Rich Rodriguez was the head coach there. He started his career back at West Virginia, obviously went to Michigan, has had a couple other stops, and West Virginia has brought him back after firing Neil Brown this year. And I think he just knows the comfort level. He knows that it'd be his defense. So I think it just had to do with credit and things like that and getting his due, which whatever.
I mean, in a field like coaching where you're only as good as the product on the field. If everyone thinks the product on the field is someone else's, you're never going to get another shot. So I totally understand if that is the reasoning.
It's not bad reasoning. The timing sucks. And then now it's back-to-back years where OU is replacing both offensive and defensive coordinators, which is very rarely a recipe for success, especially when those 2 years, it's not like we've been playoff teams. So we're not replacing guys that led us to, I mean, the first year, yes, we went 10-3. We were in line for the playoffs until late season falter. We beat Texas in a great game, one of the best games in the Cotton Bowl. But we haven't won a bowl game under Brent. We haven't won any kind, like there is outside of All Americans due to Danny Stutzman. At Owen Field on the press box, they list out, bowl championships, national championships, all that stuff. Draft picks has changed, obviously, but in terms of team success, nothing has changed on the press box, and that has to change next year. I'm not saying a bowl game will determine if he stays or not, but you have to get to 8 or 9 wins and be competitive. And I think you have to get, I've said before, I think it's 9. And he's replacing two coordinators again, offensive and defensive. Offensive, I think, is a huge increase in production. Hopefully it's been a low bar, but the defensive coordinator leaving, especially after it being a mini me, I mean, people would hear Zach Alley talk in press conferences and would be like, that's Brent Venables. That's his son or something.
But
like
that's
same mannerisms, everything.
That's exactly what you're saying. Like whatever, if people think of him and immediately think of Brent Venables, he's never going to get the credit he deserves. So I totally understand him moving now that you said that. I think that was a great point.
Yeah. And I also don't know how great of a recruiter he was. A lot of the guys, I mean, he was 29 years old when he got hired. I'm sure he's 30 now. But when you see, we had a decent class. Obviously, it wasn't a great class, but all those commits, whenever they would talk about, usually they're mentioning the coordinator on the side of the ball that they play. Whenever they're doing interviews or commitment posts, they're talking about the coordinator and their position coach. And Alley rarely ever was mentioned. It was always Brent, which again goes back to the point we just made. And so obviously recruiting it's the lifeblood of the program, but right now recruiting doesn't matter. It's success on the field.
Yeah.
So I think they probably go internal. Brandon Hall just seems like it makes too much sense. But I also don't hate bringing in somebody new and trying to. I'm literally willing to try anything with OU football right now because last year was brutal.
Oh my gosh, just the worst. But I think on his recruiting, as a 29-year-old myself, I can tell you it's so hard to relate to like 18-year-olds that I think it might be easier for like Brent or someone 10 years older than me to relate to a 19-year-old to try to get them to come to my school.
There's like an obvious age gap. They respect the age gap. Yeah,
they respect like older people maybe, but they're just gonna be like, you're just some 29-year-old whatever.
You don't know anything.
Right.
Yeah,
which I don't. So
yeah, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting offseason in Norman. obviously there's still stuff that needs to be announced in terms of coordinator for the defensive coordinator. Since we last talked, they got a couple portal commits. The main one, which is near and dear to those listening in Miami, Oklahoma, Pittsburgh State. We had a tight end. I think his name's Will Huggins, committed. It seems to be what OU's doing right now, going after D2 FCS level players and praying that somehow it translates to the SEC. Hard to bet on that.
I'm still hoping for a few big names to come our way, but I've been an optimistic fan this whole season, and I think that might change. They might have beat it out of me this year.
That's about the only thing they've beaten this year is the optimism in their fans.
Alabama.
Yep. But yeah, last thing before we wrap up with OU football, the big one that we're still waiting to hear in terms of players, R. Mason Thomas has not announced his intention, whether he's staying or going. The collective that kind of runs the NIL for OU posted something that him and Kip Lewis might be coming back, or not might be, they would be coming back. They deleted the R. Mason Thomas post, left Kip's up there. R. Mason Thomas said after the bowl game, he's still mulling it over. The hope is it's another situation like with Williams that OU's able to pony up enough NIL that he could maybe move his 4th and 5th round draft stock into, I mean, if he plays like he did last year and keeps growing on that, he's a first, second round pick next year.
He could be
an
an
all SEC guy. So we'll be waiting on that. I don't know. There's no timeline. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be within the next week or two. It has to be. But if he comes back, that's huge for this football team. But yeah, I don't know how many positive things I can say about this team right now. It's tough. But I guess this is where you earn your stripes as a fan. Say, I was there then. And when we get to the mountaintop, I've been there since the bad times. I deserve this. It's all about me. That's what I'm going to be saying whenever OU wins the national championship.
That's right. Be a fan. That's what fans do.
Yep.
You got to make it about yourself.
But Chris, before we head out tonight, it is New Year's Eve tomorrow. Do you have any New Year's resolutions when it comes to being a sports fan?
Yeah, kind of going off what you said earlier, I do have a New Year's resolution. So I was mulling it over today, and I think my New Year's resolution is to believe less in OU football. I want to get hurt less by OU football, and I think that starts with believing less. I think, and turning that belief into a team that I know will succeed in the Oklahoma City Thunder. So believe less in the Sooners, believe more in the Thunder, become more passionate about the Thunder.
Which is hard for you to do because you're already very passionate about the Thunder.
True. I think I'll probably just do the Thunder part and still believe in the OU. But
fair.
It is a New Year's resolution. People fail those all the time.
Fair. In kind of a similar vein, my New Year's resolution, I got two. One, my resolution is to not get beat up as much as I do when the Oklahoma City Thunder lose a basketball game, especially a bigger game, and even in the playoffs, because teams lose in the playoffs, and Thunder players have even said in the past that the teams that lose tend to have the advantage in the next game. So I really have to let go of that. Some nights really are tough whenever you care about the Thunder as much as I do.
I tend to agree. I tend to just stare at a wall for a while.
My wife snaps in my face, like, "Are you still there?" Yeah.
Not talk to my wife for a while, and she usually gives me an hour or two, and then I have to fake it.
Snap out of it.
I just fake it until the next day, I think.
And lastly, I think this might be our first baseball talk on the pod, but I did go to a couple baseball games last year. I did not get a hot dog. So in 2025, my New Year's resolution, I have to go to a baseball game. I have to eat a hot dog.
I love it. Are you talking MLB? Are we talking college?
I need to do MLB. That's where I want it.
Let's go to KC.
KC, Texas, Arizona. I just got to get a dog. Got to respect the dog.
How do you eat your hot dogs, Ben? Tell the world how you eat your hot dogs.
Give me some mustard on it. I've kind of adopted your situation where you kind of crinkle up the bun a little bit when it's in that tin foil. Might be one of the best things you've ever done for me.
If you want a good ballpark hot dog, get it in one of those. Like Ben said, that tinfoil pouch they come in, and squeeze it. Squeeze it up, make the bread all soft and warm, and then it's the best hot dog you'll ever eat.
And you know what? That's what we're leaving with you with in 2024. Appreciate y'all for listening, and we'll catch you next year. See y'all
next year.
Party, disco night. The music plays through all the land. And when we step out on the floor, we party. And then we dance some more.